Welcome everyone to the first episode of my new glassboard series called Reversing Glass. I'm Matt Rose, Field CISO at ReversingLabs. As you know, I've done these before, a little different format. We've changed the shirt color, we changed the name of the glassboard session, but all the information in this, big bald head is, still useless, but, interesting to people. So we're going to jump into the series. And I thought a great episode to start with was around the recent memorandum around supply chain security. So the original executive order of 14028 came out in May 2021, which was around improving the nation's cybersecurity resilience, to paraphrase. Well, the most recent memorandum that came out, which is, the numbers, the government's all about numbers, was M-22-18. And as you can see, I have it up here, the front page. This is an 8-page document. There's a lot of technical jargon in here, a lot of references to NIST specifications and secure software development frameworks and all this type of thing. But I kind of wanted to give an overview of what I thought of the document. Really what the document and the memorandum, as it's called based on kind of the release, is that organizations that want to work with the federal government are now going to self-attest that the software they're selling to the government is secure. There's no malware in there. They have to provide a complete understanding of everything's in there in terms of risk. It's interesting because the government's going down the path of supply chain, and supply chain risk is a huge issue. Everybody's very, very cognizant of looking for vulnerabilities in source code or just the open source packages or APIs. But now the supply chain is a hot issue everywhere, in the government space, in the commercial space, so on and so forth. But the government is now being very stringent in basically defining what you need to do to work with them. And it's all around new purchases of software by government agencies. It's about major release changes from, say, version 3 to version 4 has to have a complete understanding of the risk in the application, from malware to threats to backdoors to everything. And then even if it's a term-based license, which is very common in the industry, if you're going to renew the term, you got to, again, provide them with the information. But what is the information they're really looking for? There's a bunch of different kind of, gray areas in this document that says you have to provide us with all the information. Well, what is the information? It's kind of not really clearly defined, but one of the things that they really highlight in this document is that SBOMs are the preferred communication of what's in your application, what open source packages, what frameworks, what potential there is for risk in terms of malware, and also what's the goodware in your application. So it's not just thinking about the bad things. The government really wants to know what is in your application holistically, and they call it out and say the SBOM and the proper SBOM format is the way you need to do that. My question to everybody after reading this document is, how are you managing your SBOMs today? Is it a manual process? Are you using, open source tools? Are you using software composition analysis? Look at the open source packages. How are you creating it? And is it comprehensive in terms of everything within the application itself? I feel that SBOMs should be everything, and a lot of times people take a little slice based on what you're using for technology, just the open source packages or just the frameworks or something like that. But in order to work with the government, you're going to have to give them everything. And there is some time frames. Let me just change this. The government's still kind of figuring this out, and they've actually provided, let's make this a little bit, I'll move off to the side, some specific areas that they're going to come up with more information when people have to say how they're dealing with this, so on and so forth. So be prepared. A lot of organizations do work with the government, and I'd argue that this is a good starting point for not only agencies or companies working with the federal government, but also for commercial, because what's good for the government should extrapolate itself into activities for commercial use as well. So food for thought. First episode of Reversing Glass, we're going to have a lot more content, a lot more information about supply chain risk, about things you need to do to ensure that the application is copacetic and not inclusive of malware, bad things, and your processes are staying secure. Just want to say, excited to be back. Stay secure, supply chain world.